Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall, and this is a malt-centric episode at the intersection of brewer curiosity. In a moment, I'll be talking with Chris Cates of Little Animals Brewing, Brent Manning of Riverbend Malt House, and Andrew Zinn of Leveler Brewing. But first, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and podcasts. You can listen to shows like Beer Travelers, Brewer to Brewer, and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. This show and all of the work we do is supported by you. Please go visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer. There you can donate a few bucks and help keep the content fresh. That goes a long way to fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. And if you'd like to learn more about advertising on this show, please email info@allaboutbeer.com. Speaking of that, Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/drinkbeer. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/drinkbeer to take your retail business to the next level today. Go to shopify.com/drinkbeer. A year ago, Chris Cates, the founder and brewer of Little Animals Brewing in Johnson City, Tennessee, visited Belgium and came back inspired. After visiting through some of the world's best breweries, drinking classic and carefully crafted saison, he wanted to make a beer that not only paid homage to those beers, but also to impart a sense of place from Eastern Tennessee. After trying a few recipes that didn't yield the results he wanted, Cates reached out to Riverbend Malt in neighboring North Carolina to help him create a pilsner malt that would mimic those that came from Belgium. The idea, he said, was to create a local malt, quote, tailored for diastatic and mixed fermentation with higher protein and beta-glucans and built-in minerality and buffering capacity. Riverbend achieved this by creating a water profile that was rich in minerals that was used during the malting process. Brent Manning of Riverbend says that the results yielded a malt that resists pH drops slightly better than usual and allows for additional lactic acid and potential ester precursors. We'll weave the whole story from start to finish as Cates and Manning join the show with Andrew Zinn of Leveler Brewing, who has also been brewing with the malt. Here's our conversation. Let's go back to the beginning and where this idea came from.
Well,
it's a jump ball.
I think we all probably have a slightly different origin story to this because, like a lot of great ideas, I think, it's
you
one
spoke up
person
first, Andrew, so you go. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, I think we kind of all came to this together a little bit on our own, as well as coming to it together, in discussion. So there's no true single origin, but I think I brought it up with Brent years ago in my capacity in my previous position as head of sour production at Wicked Weed when we did a custom malt for our spontaneous program. I brought it up and, kind of in passing as, an idea of mimicking more European malt and really just out of some personal curiosity as to, what would this do? I guess maybe it would make sense to explain what this is here. So the water around the Asheville area is very soft, not a whole lot of minerality to it. The water in a lot of regions where barley is grown and malted is a lot harder. So we, as a brewer, most of us do a fair bit of water chemistry, at least thinking about, what does our water look like? And the idea here is well, if it affects the mash so much, why wouldn't it also affect the germination and what is residual in the kernel when you get to milling and using it? So we added brewing salts basically to the steep water as this grain was being germinated and then malted. But yeah, like I was saying, this has kind of been an idea that's been floating around in my head as just a fun thing to explore because I hadn't really been able to find any literature about it being done. And I think it took Brent, I think when I brought it up with Brent previously, it was pretty much right after they'd opened their new huge facility. And he was probably right in saying, we don't have time or energy to explore this right now. Let's just make you a custom malt. Which turned out great and, made some lovely beers with it, many of which are actually still in the barrel and probably due for starting to blend soon.
Brent, was that just an initial polite blow off, or did you think that the idea had some merit to it?
I was definitely really excited about the water chemistry piece of it. I just honestly, we were staring down the barrel of all this new equipment that was not really performing as we would like it to out of the gate. And so I was kind of like, hey, I know floor malting. Can we just really do a truly under modified pilsner for you using some new 2-row barley that we had at the time? And we really zeroed in on controlling modification and limiting color development with that specialty malt or custom malt. And that was as good as I felt we could do at the time, because I was just absolutely drowning in technical problems at the start of getting Malt House 3.0 up and running.
Makes sense.
So Chris, I think it was also when you were trying to bring on a drum roaster. So
the drum roaster. I almost burned the building down. So it's great stuff.
So Chris, how'd you come to this then?
So we brew with a lot of Riverbend malt, and we also brew with a lot of European malt and regular domestic malt too. And I noticed when just years ago when we opened and I was tracking my pHs of batches, my pH with Riverbend stuff would run 0.15 to 0.2 lower than its European or regular counterpart. And so I at first I thought it was a fluke, and then I started tracking it over every batch we brewed to the point where I even brewed there was I was 1 week I was doing our pilsner, which is Best Pils, and I was doing another beer, it's probably a saison or something that was very similar grist bill with all Riverbend Pils. And on the same week, I had the best one come in at like 5.25, and the Riverbend one come in with the same water additions, the same weight of grain, the same type of grain, come in at 5.1 something. It ranged between a little bit, but it was pretty easy to rely on it doing that. So for the longest time, I just started aiming high. So on a normal batch, I would aim, if I was aiming for 5.2, 5.25, I would just aim in the 5.3s, and then my pH wouldn't fall too low because I felt like it was a little detrimental when it would fall. I had some fall below 5 and like 4.9 something.
Okay.
So I was talking to Andrew about that one day because we just chat about nerdy stuff a lot. And he's like, oh, it's probably the water chemistry that they steep the malt with. And then it clicked. Our water here in Johnson City is very soft. The water that Riverbend malts grain with is very soft. The water in other areas where malt is made internationally is somewhat hard. So I was like, that's it. It's the residual buffering capacity from specifically the bicarbonate in likely left over in the kernel after it's kilned. So yeah, we kind of through discussing nerdy beer stuff, we were like, oh, that's got to be it. To the point where I think that what we as brewers perceive as functioning as normal, air quotes, is somewhat relying on that there is residual buffering capacity to that grain.
And then ours was lacking it, right?
Yeah, you were asking Chris that, or Andrew, yeah.
Yeah. So I asked Brent to get a water report, and sure enough, it was almost RO water from the source. And, if our water is very soft and their water is very soft, some of that minerality is certainly going to precipitate in the kernel as it's steeped and then kilned out. So a lot of we assume that a lot of international malt has buffering capacity, and then as brewers we've come to understand that as functioning normal, whereas when there is none, you might see an odd drop in pH. And for the longest time, just aiming high was fine for me. I mean, a lot of things improved for us when we just bumped the calculated pH up a little bit. Little better ester formation. We got a little better head retention.
Huh.
And I'll interject that it's not that there's none.
Yeah, jump in, Andrew.
Just
Yeah.
less in this case with the local water and this local malt. It also may there are a million factors that may not just be the water, but we thought that was an easy thing to target, and something that as brewers we're used to kind of targeting anyway. And yeah,
there's an efficiency piece too, right? That that was also
totally.
Yeah. So
Like what, Brent?
And I'll let these guys. But to me, what I gathered was this was an interesting sort of one little pardon the pun, kernel of knowledge to help our other customers have a better experience on brew day by just sort of not everyone is so meticulous on data collection during the brew, but I definitely took this information out to other accounts and was like, hey, if you didn't hit your numbers, let's go back and look at that pH and see if we're seeing this same dip out of that, what is it, 5.2 to 5.4? Is that the target?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. And so that was...
Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it helped me just to kind of understand a little bit more about the brewing process, and how to sort of troubleshoot. So this was pretty cool to me, because they all said esters, better efficiency, and also those. Chris, did you remember better head retention as well?
Yeah. So I noted better head retention because, and I'm this is all theoretical here, so I don't know this for sure, but I oftentimes mash very low in like a mid to low beta range to produce dry beers, and my pH was dipping so low when I was targeting what I would normally get from my additions and stuff. What would normally produce like in the 5.2s was producing down into the 5.1s or lower. I mean, the lowest I recorded was 4.95 from memory. But what I think might have been happening, and again, some beer scholar might listen to this and be like, oh, he's wrong, but this was just my thinking. Due to my mash temperature and my pH range, I was targeting more proteinase than normal because I was falling below ideal beta pH and into proteinase pH, where it's more active. And though I was on the high end of proteinase, I was, right there, and I was maybe getting a little more protein degradation than I would have been. The pH had been a little higher, and it was very apparent in the wort because my wort would drop so freaking clear on brew day that it was like unnatural, and it would also clean from the kettle. So the higher the pH of wort is, the less like kind of scummy it is when you're cleaning up. And my kettle would just rinse like totally clean. And I would be like, it just didn't look as a brewer, if you brewed a lot of beers, it didn't look normal.
Andrew, were you experiencing anything similar?
Well, I'll give the caveat that for a number of reasons, I use Riverbend Malt for almost everything at this brewery. So it's a little hard to have a benchmark on what I've yet to make a beer here that didn't use Riverbend as the base malt. So I don't really have a great benchmark. As far as pH goes, my personal experience was a little bit more that it didn't always do what you would expect it to do. I kind of have been in the habit of I'll go in, pull a sample, add lactic acid to get to where I want to be on pH. In general, I've been coming in a little above and then kind of, a little higher pH than I want to be and dialing it down rather than just like, okay, this is how much I need in here to do X or Y. I'm kind of a little bit more reactive in how I'm doing things. And part of that is, again, I've only been open here since November and still really, for one, that's always kind of how I brewed, but I'm still kind of dialing in my final processes. But yeah, in general with Riverbend, again, at Wicked Weed, that was always an issue, was that there was a lack of pH consistency. Not necessarily so much that it was coming in with a low pH, because sometimes it would weirdly come in with a higher pH, and that it's hard. It's hard to say exactly, but it all comes back to that buffering capability. Buffering meaning that you're just like kind of holding it within a range, and the natural constituents of the water and minerality of the grain are going to hold it between that ideal 5.2 and 5.4.
The other thing too, Andrew, we might throw in difference in 6-row and 2-row. I'm wondering if that has something to do with
it. We used a lot of 6-row down there.
Yep. And so this project was all 2-row barley here. So I'm wondering, husk, and I know our 6-row barley quality was getting a lot better through that period that you guys were ramping up the sour mixed culture and farmhouse series. So yeah, the other thing too, I think that kind of energized this project was Chris's trip with Bob Sylvester through Belgium. I think that kind of got us all in. I was living vicariously through his Instagram feed for a few weeks there. And,
I think most of us who follow Chris were, yeah.
So that kind of got me in the mood, I think, to be a little bit, to kind of to push this one into the production schedule. And so that was super cool.
So, all right, I feel like Chris's enthusiasm got us a little bit further ahead in this conversation, which is great. But so Andrew and Chris have this conversation, this idea. You're finally at a point, Brent, where you're not burning things down with a drum roaster or with your kiln, or and can think a little bit more clearly. So these guys have a theory. They have a desire. You have now the time and the capability to do it. How did you start coming up with the idea for the trials or the execution for the trials? Like what went into that?
For sure. So we started with...
Stay on script, Chris. Come on.
Yeah.
Sorry. We have a timeline, man.
Right. So we started with a baseline water report of our incoming steep water, and took a look at that. And then Chris and Andrew were doing research on their end, pulling in water reports from their buddies over in Belgium. And so all of these, and we kind of compared the two, and then there's I forgot the name of the little spreadsheet tool, but it's basically a water building calculator that you can, add in what you're starting with, and then, play around with different mineral additions to get to your final target concentrations. And so I took the data that and Chris came up with. Basically, here's what you need to add on a per gallon basis to get to our target. And then I spooled that up to our steep regime, which is about 700 gallons of water per steep. So in the malting process, you've got steeping, germinating, and kilning, the most important of which is steeping. If you don't get that right, you're going to chase the process the rest of the time. So 3 wet dry cycles over a period of about 2.5 days. And so what we did was essentially buy enough of, chalk, gypsum, calcium chloride, Epsom salt, et cetera, to get to this target water profile. And the way our 2-ton floor malt steep tank is set up, is we have what's called a regenerative blower in it, piped into it. So what that does is allow us to kind of rouse it by injecting air into it. So it kind of looks like just a big kind of bubbling volcano, I guess, when we're doing that. And so we took, it was not very elegant, but it got the job done. We took a 5-gallon bucket of warm water, mixed all these minerals in it to dissolve them partially in that, and then roused everything in the steep tank to keep everything in suspension during the steep, and did that for that same, load in, so to speak, for each of the 3 steeps before the grain was then transferred to the floor for germination. And so that everything about that, the length of the steeps, the temperature of the water, everything was the same as our normal regimen. The only difference was the water chemistry that we were working with.
Were you skeptical?
I would say I was really, on paper, I've always been fascinated with this idea of could we, make black tea or green tea and steep grain in that? And would the grain take up those flavors? And would that flavor stay all the way through into the process and make it to the finished malt? But to be honest, I had no idea what was going to happen. It was just going to be a fun experiment. And should I just go all the way through our side?
Yeah,
of
please.
Things? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So it goes through the 3 same 2.5 day steep process, gets onto the floor. It's germinating. It's looking fine, but almost right out of the gate, we started noticing that things were different. It smelled different. It didn't smell as bright and vegetal as our normal. I'll call it the companion product to this would be a Chesapeake Pilsner, which is grown made using Violetta barley from coastal Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were to put that on the floor, it smells like fresh cut cucumbers. It's very grassy, and it's just brighter aromas. And so this farmhouse Pilsner was a bit more earthy when it hit the floor. It was still germinating in a steady cadence. So the first thing we look for is the chit to pop out of the kernel. And then from the chit, we see rootlet material growing, and we're raking the grain 3 times a day. But like I say, everything just seemed to be at just a slower pace throughout germination. We put it through the same kilning regime that we would the standard Chesapeake Pilsner, again, trying to do apples to apples as best we could from a comparison standpoint. Send everything off to the lab. We do our in-house hot steep, which is basically just a malt tea. And, again, all of those. So under modification, typically presents as more of a slightly undercooked pasta flavor. It's just a little bit grainier, a little bit earthier. We lose some of the richer, sort of sweeter melon type character from it. And that's exactly what I picked up in the hot steep of the farmhouse pills. Is it just didn't present those warmer, richer fruit character. It was not as clear, which is also another sort of point when you don't have great modification, you don't have that protein breakdown. And so, like Chris pointed out earlier, that brilliantly clear wort, we just didn't see that with this sample in the lab. And when we got the lab data back, it confirmed our suspicions. So we had lower than expected extract numbers. Color was great, 1.7 SRM, so that was right on target. Beta-glucans were elevated. That's definitely a very clear, shot over the bow that you have not modified the grain properly. So the beta-glucans were up just over 400. So our normal Pilsner malts would be, 80 to 100 typically. And alpha amylase levels, DP, they were all in line. The filtration time was slower than normal. So there's a lot of, and the S over T, the soluble over total, was at 40.8. Normally our Pilsner malts are 43, 44. So again, same barley, same place, same process, but this water chemistry addition seemed to slow down the process of modifying the grain. And we saw a lot of that data come through on the C of A. So I guess I can say with some level of confidence that it did do something in the malt house to change the grain and the finished malt.
Huh.
But now
I can
the strange. Oh yeah, Chris, you go ahead and then I'll put in my piece.
Please.
I can say in using it, it corrected my pH problem, which wasn't really a problem. It was just an obstacle to work around. But my pHs with the 2 beers I used with the malt functioned as normal, and that 100% is due to the built-in buffering capacity from the water additions. Another interesting thing that I would touch on is, so when the specs for that malt first came back, we almost were a little disappointed, I think, because the extract is a little low.
Yeah.
The beta-glucans are really high, which is going to create a runoff issue for some people. But in looking at it more, so my big inspiration for using this malt was I wanted to make a like straight down the middle classic Belgian saison, like not with any modern hop twist or anything like that. I wanted to do like just a home run classic Belgian saison a la DuPont or something like that. But I wanted to arrive at it through all American ingredients. So it was firmly an American saison, but it hit the flavor profile of Belgian saison. And my favorite one is Blaugy. Was it saison de Apotre? I don't know how to say it. The spelt saison. And using all this farmhouse pills, due to the elevated beta-glucans, almost hit the same kind of vibe as that beer, which is 30% spelt. And I actually looked in a little bit to the ppm beta-glucans, like what that means in use. The amount of beta-glucans in the farmhouse pills malt are about equivalent roughly to if you did 10% oats in your grist, but it's just all Pilsner malt. So what that's going to do is lead to, a little fuller mouthfeel, a little bit viscous, which is really neat with a mixed culture or diastatic fermentation where it's eating everything else out of it. It leaves you a little bit more meat on the bone, let's say. So yeah, I mean, in practice, it nailed what I was going for, like even better than I thought it would.
More in a moment, but first, thanks to this episode's sponsor. You know that's the sound of another sale on your online Shopify store, but did you know Shopify powers selling in person too? That's right. Shopify is the sound of selling everywhere, online, in store, on social media, and beyond. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/drinkbeer. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/drinkbeer to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/drinkbeer. And now back to the conversation with Chris Cates, Brent Manning, and Andrew Zinn.
On my end, my runoffs have been slightly quicker, smoother, and which is not what you'd given the spec sheet. And my mash efficiency's been higher. I'm getting, whatever the malt sheet spec sheet says, I'm actually getting a higher extract than with the Chesapeake, which is the other base malt that I typically use. And at Riverbend, at Burial, when we used this Riverbend malt, he was Scott, the pub brewer there, was kind of we were just hanging out chatting, and he was like, "Wait a second, I'm at kettle full already, like 35, 40 minutes early or something," and kind of slightly overshot the gravity. So, there may be something else going on.
Yeah.
But whatever the specs come in at, because I couldn't get that same by hitting the same pH. It's definitely not just a pH thing. Maybe the increased calcium. There's so many different little things again that are beyond my realm of what I need to fill my head with at this point. I'll leave all of the science of the malt to Brent for now, as I continue to learn and understand like basic accounting and all of that I need to learn as a newer brewery owner.
Love that.
But as a brewer, this like kind of exceeded my expectations as far as hitting the numbers I was wanting. Ease of use, like it kind of is a little bit more consistent as far as each batch that I've done. I kind of intentionally, between two batches, added the same amount of acid just to see what it would do for myself. I don't have my notes out in front of me, but a similar grist with the same amount of acid gave me the exact same end result, which is not always typical for me.
So crazy. Yeah, I don't think we're done with this one from an analysis standpoint by any stretch of the imagination.
I know we're almost out of the malt in your warehouse.
I've got to pull a bag aside here for some additional laboratory QA/QC just to see, because it really is intriguing. I saw that, I think the extract number was like 74.5, and I was like, oh my God, what did we do here? And then these guys are like, no, it's great, everything's going swimmingly, Brent. So I don't have a great answer for that side of the ledger. The only thing I'll say on beta-glucans is that's kind of a catch-all number, and there's kind of different molecular weight beta-glucans that it can cause. If you're heavily weighted on one side versus the other, they can cause more problems, but your number can be the same. So the beta-glucan can be a little deceptive, but still 400 was elevated beyond our comfort zone for sure.
Is there a future for programs like this?
Oh yeah, I'm excited by this. I mean, I think, again, the idea for me of, when we talk to our customers, especially as lagers continue to gain prominence as a style craze, if you will, maybe we can use that term. Not mad about it, but
no, I mean, Ashley Carter from Bierstadt has said lagers are on a 500-year winning streak, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
She would.
But a lot of folks are, this is kind of the final wall to tear down, maybe for craft malt, is winning over, some of these, folks that are like, nope, when it comes to, I'll do craft malt all day long until we get to lockers. And then there's a wall around that style. I only use, Pilsner malt from XYZ Malt House overseas. And that's my jam. And, people have always said, well, your Chesapeake Pilsner is the closest thing to the continental profile. And maybe this Violetta barley plus water chemistry additions gets us one step closer to that continental profile that wins over folks to say, yep, okay, now you got it. You've got something that is right on target with the stuff from overseas, and I'm going for it.
The very first beer that we brewed with the malt was a straight up Pilsner. I think Andrew as well.
Yeah, I'm actually sipping on mine right now.
Jealous.
I ended up doing a triple decoction on mine. I've kind of Frankensteined my system into being decoctionable and use that as much as I possibly can. And actually have a sample of the Hellas we just put on this week. That's all the Chesapeake malts. Basically, the almost identical grist, except the two different malts. Granted, different hopping, different,
but definitely
different water additions. But yeah, like two very, very similarly malt forward, very much Pilsner based beers, and I kind of poured those for myself so I could think a little bit more about the differences between what those are doing. But yeah, I thought it was really important to try running this as a Pilsner as well, or at least some sort of blonde lager, since that's a big part of what I do. And, kind of in the back of my head, I've been thinking about this as like something that we could hopefully talk Brent into doing again, and then again, and then again, and then again, and just make this be our kind of house, base malt that we use. And we'll talk off air about that, Brent. But if you're interested in continuing this experiment, we definitely are too. And I think might be able to talk some other friends into
for sure
more interest too.
People are I was starting to get gently picked on by some of our customers who are like, really, another Pilsner malt, Brent? Are you serious? Like, how many do you need? And well, I'm kind of like, well, as long as I'm tasting differences in between them, I'm game. Whether it's single origin, variety based, water chemistry, kilning approach, a truly under modified Pilsner, it's. My question to you guys, I guess, is, is the hard water profile in Belgium remarkably different from a harder profile out of Germany or the Czech Republic? Like, is there enough differentiation there, or is this kind of can we just call it a Western Europe hard water profile and kind of go with it from there?
Well, Belgium is a small country. It's like 2.5 hours to drive across it. Yeah. And in the research that I did, there's pretty wildly different water profiles just across Belgium. I don't know what the water profiles look like in Germany. My understanding is that the Czech water profiles are very soft. Mm-hmm. So your
Czech pills.
Pills. Moravia is different.
Yeah. Your Czech pills may be more spot on than you think, because their water is very soft there, allegedly. Mm-hmm. But to come up with the water profile, I talked to a couple of brewers I know in Belgium, and then I also just Google searched around, and I saw one alleged water profile in Brussels, Antwerp, Mons. A friend of mine that works at the brewery Duranca gave me theirs. And the one thing they all shared was the bicarb was a high. Mm-hmm. Calcium, magnesium, sulfate were all pretty elevated, some more elevated than others. And I would imagine similar in the UK as well. but I can't speak to that with accuracy because I don't know.
Oh yeah, that would be another potential, the UK water profile to make like the classic, English old school IPA. I could be fun.
I'm all for that.
Love it. But yeah, from a functionality standpoint, our production team, is I think I can do a little arm twisting to get them to play along to make this. Making it at the 10-ton scale might be a little tricky because we do have the plumbing is a little bit more hard piped from there, but yeah, we've got capacity on the 2-ton floor malt line to tinker some more with this and potentially improve the process. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I think, this is, like I said, maybe we can play around with silly things like, green tea and,
I liked when you brought that up earlier. Yeah.
I mean, it's complete lunacy from a malt science standpoint, but, a fun experiment nonetheless to see if something like that, maybe that's.
Have you guys seen? I'm sorry, Brent. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. You're good. No, I was just thinking, with I've tasted so many beautiful rice lagers lately. I'm wondering, if a green tea infused Pilsner malt could supply something, some additional flavor notes to that style.
Sounds like a great saison too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Your email is about to be flooded with tens of brewers who are excited about this.
Right, exactly. Yeah, tens of brewers. That's exactly right. So, yeah.
No, I'd love to see that. I think there's probably much more interest in that than maybe Rauch malt, which is disappointing. But
right. Yeah,
we'll get there.
We're slowly marching towards it. Andrew, were you going to jump in with something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think to me what would be most interesting is, now we base this on a specific, kind of Belgian profile. It'd be really interesting to look at some of those other growing regions, again, like in the Czech Republic, the Pilsen area, the Bohemia is pretty soft water. But once you get out towards Moravia, it's getting into the Carpathian Mountains, and it's totally different, groundwater chemistry, which I don't really know much about it yet, but, same for, the middle of England where they're growing barley southern, looking at all of these different regions and kind of like, okay, in all of these regions, is there anything that particularly spikes? And, there's also some level that when we're doing a mash and we drop in a bunch of water chemistry additions, different brine salts, it can be swayed quite a bit. What a particular, barley corn is going to uptake during the steep is a little different. I think it'd be really interesting to see, is there a maximum amount that it's uptaking, and is this a push or a nudge that we're doing with our chemistry here? And, is it like a part per million or a part per billion that it's pulling up? Because either one can still make a pretty big difference in the end result. And that may affect, if this is just a thing that's going to increase efficiency across the board and, get more consistency in end result for brewers, looking at those large batch systems, just from my standpoint as a brewer, like, Brent, if it only takes, a 1 10-gallon addition to your enormous steep tank, then all of a sudden it makes, just get a cellar brink and push it in.
Right.
But if the amount that we needed to add to our to this 2-ton batch is actually, if that's what you need to actually make the difference, then it becomes a bigger conversation.
And also, the amount that
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm saying just to that point, in each 700-gallon batch, there was like 4 or 5 pounds of salt added. So, I mean, it's not a huge kind of heaven and earth thing, but I like the idea of the brink piping in. That could make things really easy from a production standpoint.
Yeah.
Great that you guys are workshopping this right now.
Yeah. I mean, as an end user, from the brewing side of things, I would love to see this continue and get dialed in a little bit more. And, for me, this made a massive difference. I'm like I said, I use a ton of Riverbend malt for a ton of different reasons, both on the quality side and because I can reliably get the exact milling that I want without owning my own mill, because I don't have a place for it, even down to I can get stuff delivered to me. But I think the actual character of the malt has a unique little, I hesitate to use terroir because I think it's an overused kind of become a cliched term, but
right. No, but no,
brewing traditions are built around using local ingredients, and we don't do enough of that in the US. And I think there's a lot of, I'm going to use, Czech malt to make this Czech beer. And, they're getting malt that didn't sit on a ship for a month and a half and didn't sit in a warehouse for another 6 months and a half. And, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot more factors than just using that ingredient from that place. And I think we can be making a lot better beer having these dialogues with the producers of our raw ingredients and being able to, in a lot of ways, it's like a brewer going out for hop selection and saying, okay, I really, I like my Simcoe that's harvested early, so it gets a little bit less of that cat piss. Or in my case, I actually want that diesel and cat piss in it. It's because those don't end up translating into the end product. And I think just looking at a spec sheet doesn't really tell you that much about what the malt actually is going to do. I think there's just an area that feels underexplored. And instead of just buying a product off the shelf, thinking about the bigger picture of why a thing does a thing is really fun and interesting. And it's kind of like, this is craft malt. We're really kind of taking this American craft brewing approach to like, not just like, what are we looking for, but like, why were choices made? Why, and by choices, I mean, like, even down to like, where's the malt house located? And we're not necessarily tied to just using our water here. We're able to take our water and make it mimic somewhere else's. And that's really, really fun and really exciting.
Yeah. No, and you nailed it. I mean, it's to me, it's like what we're doing. It's bridging those gaps between classic styles and sort of the walls that people build around these things. It's like, no, actually, we've got ingredients here now that can do a lot of the heavy lifting that you're looking for, so this is super cool stuff. And looking forward to writing the next chapter.
I love it. This is these are the fun shows for me because I don't even have to do anything. I just let you guys do all the work and just sit here and learn and listen. So being mindful of time though, is there anything that we didn't get to? I mean, I know Chris, you said the beers that you've made, they've been well received and that you've been enjoying them. And then Andrew, you're sipping on one right now and enjoying it. Has consumer response been positive thus far?
Yeah, in my experience, we brewed a pilsner that was just called Farmhouse Pils, and then it's kind of a joke around here because people are like, "Why is a pilsner a farmhouse?" And like, "Oh, it's just the name of the pilsner that we brewed it with." But
that was our working title for ours, also.
I love it.
In making I was like, we've got this malt here that we had a hand in designing, so I got to brew a pills with it because that's going to be the best way to taste it. But the intent for me was to brew the saison that I mentioned earlier, and so the pilsner and the saison were identical, same hops, same grain, and everything. Just one was fermented with our saison blend, and the other one was fermented with lager yeast. And that's been cool for beer nerds to taste. They're both on tap right now. Did a bottle release of the saison, and that's available now, and it's going into Tennessee distribution soon. But yeah, I don't know. I think you got to be like a pretty high level beer nerd to like care about custom malt. But the ones who get it, like, it's really cool to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've seen the same. Andrew, are you putting anything in package?
Yeah, I canned sheep shaped that has this as base malt. And then I've got another batch of Four Horn. These are what I'm calling farmhouse IPAs. So, not to make up another IPA style, but I figured I'd make up another IPA style. And
Sure.
So these are, kind of IPA-ish in how they're, it's heavy whirlpool hops, decent amount of bitterness. And then they're fermented with a couple different sack strains, a couple different Brettanomyces strains, and fermented very hot. And, the idea is to make a Brett beer that's made to be served relatively young. My tank residency is about the same as a quicker lager. So maybe a hair longer than a regular IPA, but this is not a beer to be aged. Brettanomyces is not sour beer. Very important, everyone who's listening.
Yes, amen.
But yeah, I feel like on those, for what it's worth, they've dropped a little brighter. The clarity's been a little higher earlier with this farmhouse pills. So far, I think I put a little bit more thought into like kind of benchmarking things with Four Horns, which is in the tank right now. It's just wrapping up the second stage of primary. And that one, the ester profile is so much higher already. Again, I have no idea of whether that's directly from the malt or from this round of Brettanomyces. It's always a little tough call, but yeah, if I can use this malt for those beers, I definitely will, because it does seem like I am getting a slightly quicker turn time, and I'm definitely getting higher efficiency. These go into an open fermenter, which on a 5-barrel system, I'm able to run into 1,000-liter fermenter, and by the time it makes it through my system, I get a full like 6.5, 7-barrel yield on a 5-barrel system, which is really good for the bottom line.
Well, it's sounding like all of the beer nerds and malt nerds need to be getting to Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee to experience what you guys have going on right now.
Yeah. These guys brew great beer, and it's definitely a must-see experience to swing by their shops when you're in the area.
I love it. I think we covered a lot of ground. So I'll say, Andrew, Brent, and Chris, thanks for being on the show this week, and thanks for pushing experimentation forward. The beer world needs more of these ideas and then follow through these days. So I'm glad to hear it's still happening and that you all are doing it. What's a cool innovation in the beer space that you want the world to know about? Tell me about it. You can email me. It's John Hall. That's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. Or you can tell me on X, the site formerly known as Twitter, at John_Hall. That's also how you can get in touch with questions, comments, and guest suggestions. A reminder, go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can check out the podcast page, the shop page, and read great new content, as well as the archives going back to 1979. You can also follow All About Beer on social media at All About Beer. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, and we hope you are, email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or simply go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Speaking of that, here's a quick word from this episode's sponsor. Customers are rushing to your store. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/drinkbeer. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/drinkbeer to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/drinkbeer. Don't forget, All About Beer has a podcast channel now. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.